It is 50,000 years ago, and a woman wakes up and cannot eat. The smell of meat cooking on the fire, a smell she has woken to every morning of her life, turns her stomach. There is no test she can take, no calendar, no doctor. Nobody on earth has yet worked out what a menstrual cycle is, or where babies come from. And yet within a few weeks, she will know she is pregnant. So will every other woman around her. Here is the strange part. The first pregnancy test in human history was not invented by anyone. It was the sickness itself. You are probably assuming she noticed a missed period. She almost certainly did not. An anthropologist named Beverly Strassmann spent years documenting the reproductive lives of Dogon women in Mali, living without contraception or industrial food. She found that a woman in those conditions has somewhere around 100 periods in her entire life. A woman in a modern city has closer to 400. Think about what that means. Her cycle was interrupted constantly, by pregnancy, by years of breastfeeding, by seasons when food ran short. Bleeding was the exception, not the rhythm. A missed period was not a signal. It was normal. So, her body used a louder one. For a long time, morning sickness was treated as a malfunction, a miserable accident of pregnancy. Then two biologists, Samuel Flaxman and Paul Sherman, gathered every study they could find and looked at what pregnant women were actually rejecting. It was not random. Overwhelmingly, it was meat, fish, eggs, and strong-tasting vegetables. In other words, the foods most likely to carry parasites, bacteria, or plant toxins. And the timing was not random either. The nausea peaks in the first trimester, during the exact weeks when an embryo's organs are forming, and it is most vulnerable to being damaged. The sickness is not the pregnancy going wrong. It is the pregnancy defending itself. So the announcement came from inside. Before she understood, before anyone told her, her own body had already changed her behavior to protect something she did not yet know was there. Then came the second signal, and this one was the moment it became real. Around 4 or 5 months, she would feel movement, not pain, not sickness, a flutter, low down, like something turning over. For most of human history, across almost every culture we have records of, this was the moment a pregnancy officially began. Not conception, which nobody could observe, quickening, the day the child announced itself. And by then, the group already knew. Because in a band of 30 people who see each other every day, who eat together and sleep near each other, there is no hiding a body that has stopped bleeding and started refusing food. The older women had seen this dozens of times. They knew before she did. Which brings us to what actually happened next. The moment a pregnancy became known, the group reorganized itself around it. Sarah Blaffer Hrdy, an anthropologist who spent her career on this, argues that humans are what biologists call cooperative breeders. Unlike almost every other ape, we do not raise our young alone. Mothers, grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and unrelated women in the group all share the work of keeping a child alive. A chimpanzee mother carries and feeds her infant almost entirely by herself and will not let others hold it for months. A human infant is passed around within hours of being born. So the pregnant woman was not sidelined. She was absorbed. Her heavy work was quietly redistributed. Food came to her. And a much older woman, who had done this many times, began staying closer to her than usual. That woman was not being kind. She was being necessary. Because here is the thing about human birth that almost nobody is told. Two anthropologists, Rosenberg and Wenda Trevathan, spent years comparing how different primates give birth, and they found something that separates us completely. When a monkey gives birth, the infant emerges facing the mother. She can reach down, guide it out, wipe its face, and lift it to her chest, all by herself. Monkeys routinely give birth alone, at night, and it works. Human babies come out facing the other way. Our infants have to rotate as they descend, because our pelvis was reshaped for walking upright while our skulls kept growing. By the time the head emerges, the baby is facing away from the mother's body, which means she cannot safely reach down and lift it. Pulling a baby in that position risks bending its neck backwards, the wrong way. She cannot clear its airway easily. She often cannot even see it. Rosenberg and Trevathan gave this a name: obligate midwifery. Every other animal on this planet can deliver its own young. Somewhere in the last 2 million years, we became the species that evolved to need someone else's hands. Read that again. Assistance at birth is not a cultural invention. It is a biological requirement. Which means that for as long as there have been humans, there have been people whose job was to catch them. Those were the first specialists in human history. Before farmers, before priests, before anyone made a wheel. Now, for a long time, the textbook explanation for all this was simple. Walking upright narrowed the pelvis, big brains widened the head, and birth became a painful compromise between the two. It even has a name, the obstetrical dilemma. But a biological anthropologist named Holly Dunsworth tested it, and the numbers did not hold up. A wider pelvis, she found, would not actually have made walking or running meaningfully less efficient, so the squeeze cannot be the whole story. Her alternative is stranger and more unsettling. Birth may be timed not by the size of the opening, but by the mother's metabolism. A pregnancy demands a rising amount of energy, week after week, until it approaches the ceiling of what a human body can physically sustain. Under that explanation, labor does not begin because the baby will not fit. It begins because the mother has run out of fuel. And what the women around her did next, we can still see traces of. She did not lie on her back. Lying flat is a recent habit, convenient for the attendant rather than the woman, and it works against gravity. She squatted, knelt, or hung from someone else's shoulders. Modern research agrees with her. Upright labor tends to be shorter. Afterwards came the part we have most thoroughly forgotten. She did not go back to work. For weeks, sometimes months, the group carried her. Other women fed her, held the infant, and took over her older children. That period was not a courtesy. In a cooperative breeder, it is the mechanism. It is how the species keeps mothers alive. So why does almost none of this appear in history? Because it was never written down. Birth knowledge lived in the memory of women, who learned it by standing beside other women, and it was handed on by doing, not by recording. When writing finally arrived, it was largely controlled by men, and birth was considered a domain beneath their notice. Tens of thousands of years of accumulated expertise sat entirely in human heads, and human heads do not survive. It is not that ancient women knew nothing. It is that nobody thought their knowledge was worth keeping, but the evidence has resurfaced from an unexpected direction. The Cochrane Collaboration, which reviews medical research to a standard higher than almost anything else in science, examined trials covering more than 15,000 births. They were testing one variable, whether a woman had continuous support from another person throughout labor. The women who did had shorter labors. They were less likely to need a cesarean. They were less likely to need pain medication. Their babies were in better condition at birth. One person, staying in the room, doing nothing technological at all. That is the oldest medical intervention in human history, rediscovered by clinical trial, and it works. So the woman who woke 50,000 years ago and could not stand the smell of the fire did not have a test, or a hospital, or a name for what was happening to her. She had a body that warned her before she understood. And she had people who would not leave the room. You are here, because that was enough.